When Natalie Portman walked onto the set of The View, she expected a spirited conversation. What she got was a calculated ambush. At the center of it all, Joy Behar was ready to expose what she called Hollywood hypocrisy. What started as a takedown turned into something no one saw coming. In the next few minutes, reputations would crack, alliances would shift, and one voice would leave the studio changed forever. Stay with us. You know what, Natalie? Maybe you should stop pretending intelligence makes you untouchable. The words hit the studio floor like shattered glass. That moment, raw, brittle, irreversible, was still a few minutes away. Before the temperature dropped and the stage lights turned hostile, there was the illusion of welcome. Applause echoed high and empty as Natalie Portman stepped onto the set with the poised grace, polished by years of red carpets and political rounds. She smiled, not the Hollywood kind, not the rehearsed kind. It was tight, reflexive. Her eyes scanned the table, stopped at Joy Behar, and something in her face flinched almost imperceptibly, like someone who had just seen a dog bare its teeth but hadn't decided whether it would bite. Joy stood up, clapping with exaggerated enthusiasm, mouthing words over the music. "So glad to have you." Her arms opened for a half-hug. Natalie returned it brief. Holla. Somewhere in the crowd, a laugh-track-style chuckle was just a fraction too loud, too early. The set gleamed white, soft blues, sun-drenched optimism that belied the weight of the folders resting in front of Joy. They were thick, branded with yellow post-its, curling slightly at the corners. As the cameras panned out for the wide shot, Joy's fingers casually grazed the top sheet, nudging it just enough that a corner lifted. On it, in all caps, Natalie Portman, underlined. A stage handoff screen whispered something, and Joy nodded. But her mic, still hot, caught the whisper back. 3 minutes in, then we pivot. Natalie didn't flinch. Or maybe she did a flicker behind her eyes. Her hands stayed politely folded on the table, but her fingers tapped once, then twice, a silent metronome measuring something no one else could hear. Whoopi Goldberg leaned in with the official opening. "Welcome back to The View. We've got an exciting guest today. Actress, activist, and depending on who you ask, one of the most polarizing voices in Hollywood. Please welcome Natalie Portman." Applause again, slightly less enthusiastic. Like the audience sensed, this wasn't the usual press tour dance. Natalie adjusted the mic clip to her blazer. Her voice, when it came, was measured silk. "Thank you for having me. It's good to be here." "Wait." Joy, already leaning forward, elbows on the table, hands folded like a lawyer waiting to cross-examine. "Oh, come on, Natalie. Just good." Her smile had the shape of warmth, but none of its temperature. "I like a good conversation," Natalie said, still composed, especially with strong women. "It keeps us honest." "Honest," Joy repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's exactly what we're going for today." Natalie glanced at her glass of water, picked it up. The surface trembled just a little. She took a sip, set it down. The condensation had left a small circle already drying under the studio lights. Behind the cameras, someone adjusted a cue card. Another stagehand mouthed something to the producer. A nervous energy was building, not visible, not loud, but unmistakable. Like the moment before a courtroom hears an objection. Joy tapped her papers again. "Not yet. Not quite." "Before we dive in," she said, "let me just say you've had quite a career. Oscar winner, Harvard graduate, outspoken advocate on everything from animal rights to Middle East policy." Natalie nodded once. "I care about things. I think most people do. But not everyone uses their platform the same way. Some use it for art, others for advocacy. You've made it personal." The smile never reached Natalie's eyes. It's hard not to when the issues are personal. Joy's finger slid a paperclip off one corner of the folder. Her voice was light, but the blade was already unsheathed. "We're going to get into all of that. But first, how's the new film?" A question that should have been easy, safe. But Natalie paused half a second too long. "It's about power," she said. "Who has it, how they use it, and who pays The price. The audience gave a soft murmur, not laughter. Not quite applause or recognition of weight. Joy leaned back, smiled wider, almost triumphant. Then, c'est Saïd. Natalie blinked, and for the briefest moment, her fingers curled inward on the table. Whoopi cleared her throat. "Let's talk about the role," she said, trying to steer the segment. But Joy already had one hand on the folder. The moment was coming. 2 minutes in, 1 to go. "Let's start with something light," Joy said, and the studio lights dimmed slightly, enough for the LED screen behind them to flicker on. The audience's collective breath pulled in, instinctively sensing the shift. It was too early for a clip from the film. Instead, there it was. A screenshot of a tweet, Natalie's handle, the verified checkmark, and a timestamp from 2 years ago. The font was unmistakably Twitter's. The background, the usual sterile white. But the content. Sometimes silence is violence. Sometimes neutrality is complicity. Joy reread it aloud, slowly, as if reciting scripture. She let the last word hang in the air, then turned to Natalie with raised brows and mock innocence. "Strong words." Natalie didn't blink. "I stand by that." "Well," Joy said, tilting her head. "Interesting, because this tweet, which you later deleted, came just weeks before. Your name appeared in a guest list at a private gala in Beverly Hills, hosted by, shall we say, less than neutral participants in a few global issues. C'est pas usted. C'est pas usted." The audience shifted again. A few whispers, one cough. Natalie's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Joy. "You're drawing a line that doesn't exist." Joy raised her hands, as if "I'm just asking questions." "But your tone," Natalie replied, "suggests you've already answered them." Joy turned to the audience. "D.E.?" she asked, playing to the crowd, then chuckled. "I must be more persuasive than I thought." The LED screen changed again. Another tweet, simpler, more recent. "Every voice matters, but some voices drown out others." Joy read it, then said, "Beam. Do you ever worry your voice is doing just that?" Natalie leaned back slightly, folding her hands in her lap. "No. I worry about the voices that are never heard." "Easy to say," Joy replied. "Bet when your voice gets national headlines and standing ovations." Natalie let a breath out through her nose. "Not a sigh. Not yet. Not get. More like a pressure valve being tested." "Are you suggesting I should be quiet?" she asked. "I'm suggesting," Joy said, drawing out the syllables like sugar melting on the tongue, "that maybe shouting into the void feels noble. But when that void is already filled with your own echo, it's hard to hear anyone else." Natalie didn't answer immediately. Her fingers curled once more against the table's edge. One knuckle whitened. She glanced down at the condensation ring her glass had left earlier, then looked back up. "You're assuming intent," she said finally, "but I use my voice precisely because I've seen what happens when people in my position stay silent." Joy smiled again, that same curved blade of a grin. "But only sometimes, right?" She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowered, conversational now, the kind that didn't just ask. It accused while pretending not to, because people noticed. "Natalie, you were vocal during some movements, silent during others. You praised activists in one country but sidestepped protests in another. You marched for some lives, stayed home for others." "I don't attend everything I care about," Natalie said, "and I don't tweet everything I feel." Joy gave a short laugh. "Of course not. That would be honest." The air in the studio grew denser. A cough from the back row. A chair creaked as someone leaned forward. The spotlight above caught the edges of Joy's folder again, casting a thin, sharp rectangle of light across the desk. Natalie noticed it. "Everyone did." She straightened a fraction. "Joy," she said, calm but sharper now. "You've prepared for this. You didn't invite me here to talk about a film. You wanted this moment. And you, Joy said without missing a beat. Knew it the second you walked in, so why did you come? Natalie didn't answer, and that was its own kind of answer. Whoopi cleared her throat. Maybe we can. But Joy raised a hand gently, eyes still on Natalie. One more thing. Oh, the lead changed again. This time it wasn't a tweet. It was a screen grab from a message board, time-stamped and highlighted. A line from a fan account claiming Natalie had turned down an event because she didn't want to get political overseas. This one's a little murky, Joy admitted, so I'll let you clarify. But it's out there, and the internet never forgets. Natalie tilted her head, considered the screen, then looked back at Joy. You're right, she said softly. The internet never forgets, but it doesn't always remember the truth. Another ripple through the room. A few claps, scattered, hesitant. Joy turned in her chair, slow and deliberate. Well, she said, her voice cool again. We're just getting started. Natalie reached for her water. The surface didn't tremble this time. She took a sip, eyes fixed, straight ahead. 2 tweets down, 1 truth, distorted. The file in front of Joy still closed, but not for long. Natalie set her glass down gently. The ring of condensation had nearly vanished, leaving only a faint impression, like a memory the table wasn't quite ready to let go of. She looked at Joy, then at the camera, then back again. Her voice, when she spoke, was lower than before measured, steady. You've made some strong points. Joy, she said, you've quoted my words, framed them, turned them into exhibits, a pose, just long enough. So, let's talk about yours. Joy's eyebrows lifted just slightly. A blink that came too fast to control. Natalie didn't wait. January 2018, she said. You joked that Mike Pence's face looked like he just smelled a dirty diaper when asked about LGBTQ rights. That went viral. That same week you dismissed a trans rights bill as too confusing for average voters. You apologized sort of. Joy's fingers tapped the table once. Then again that rhythm. Natalie continued. March 2020 said live on air, and I quote, if people want to believe bleach cures, let them. You laughed. It was a joke until the emails came in from the family of someone who actually tried it. And then last year, Natalie's tone sharpens just slightly, like a knife being honed against stone. You said that people who question vaccines should be banned from airlines and grocery stores and civil society. Those were your words, not quoted, not misinterpreted. Yours. The audience was dead silent. Even the lights seemed to dim, as if the studio itself had inhaled. You asked me about using my platform, Natalie said. So, I'm asking you, who holds you accountable when your words hurt someone? When your words spread faster than truth? Joy let out a breath that sounded almost like a scoff. She leaned forward again, but this time the posture lacked weight, more reflex than confidence. I've been doing this show for over 20 years, she said. I've made mistakes, sure, but I own them. Natalie nodded slowly. Do you? Or do you bury them under the next punchline? Joy didn't answer. Her fingers kept tapping. Now irregular, nah. Insistent. You said something earlier. Natalie went on, not giving space to recover. About echoes, about whose voices drown others out. Let's follow that thread, because there's a difference between having a voice and having a microphone. She leaned in now. Eyes locked on Joy. Not everyone with a microphone should be holding it. A collective inhale swept through the audience like a breeze. No claps this time, just quiet shock. Joy's face held a smile, but her eyes had narrowed, calculating. Defensive. I think you're confusing critique with censorship, she said. No, Natalie replied calmly. I'm challenging the idea that being loud makes you right. Joy shifted in her seat. The leather creaked beneath her. Her hand hovered briefly over the folder again, then pulled back. You're very composed today, she said, almost rehearsed. Natalie tilted her head. Experience, she said. You learn to stay calm when people are waiting for you to crack. Joy's smile faltered, then steadied. I'm not trying to make you crack, Natalie. I'm just trying to understand the person behind the platform. Natalie looked at her for a long moment. No, she said quietly. You're trying to trap the person behind the platform. That's different. The audience responded low and unsure, like they weren't quite ready to pick sides, but they were leaning just slightly just enough to feel the shift in weight. Whoopi glanced at the producers. Someone behind the camera made a gesture. The segment was already over time, but no one dared cut it. Joy straightened her shoulders. Reset. You're passionate. I respect that. But passion doesn't make someone immune to contradiction. Neither does tenure, Natalie answered. The silence returned, thick as fog. Natalie, let it sit. Let it breathe. Let it breathe. Then she said the line that turned the tables completely. You're asking the right questions. Joy, she said, but you're not listening to the answers. There. It was. The studio didn't gasp. It didn't need to. Every face said it. That one landed. Joy looked down. Her fingers were still tapping, but now it sounded like static-like interference. Natalie leaned back. The game had shifted, and for the first time since stepping on set, she looked entirely at home. Let's not pretend we're all saints here, Natalie. Joy's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. She didn't raise it. She didn't have to. The tone did the work. Smooth, cool, razor-sharp. And then the screen behind them changed again. It wasn't a tweet this time. Not a quote. No room for interpretation. Poto. Natalie in a black dress. A red carpet smile. One hand raised in a wave. The other clasped around the arm of a man everyone in Hollywood had now carefully removed from there. Narati's a director whose name had become synonymous with whispers, lawsuits, and statements beginning with, I had no idea. The audience made that sound the one just short of a gasp, the collective recognition of a name they weren't supposed to say out loud anymore. Natalie looked at the screen, just once, and then she didn't move. Joy let the silence bloom before she spoke again. Tell me, she said, too soft to be casual. What was it like, attending his gala? Did the champagne taste any different, knowing what you knew? Still, Natalie didn't react. Not visibly. Not yet. Joy's fingers moved again, this time reaching into the folder she'd been guarding like state secrets. She pulled out a printout, highlighted lines in thick yellow ink. An email, she said, holding it like a legal exhibit, dated 2 weeks before that photo between you and your agent. You wrote, she cleared her throat. Reading, he makes me uncomfortable, but it's high profile. If I don't go, it sends a message I'm not sure I want attached to my name right now, so looked up. Want to explain that? The studio had gone still. Even the production crew behind the cameras wasn't moving. The silence wasn't awkward. It was clinical, surgical, like the moment a scalpel makes contact and everyone holds their breath. Natalie turned to the screen again. Not quickly, not with panic. It was deliberate, like facing something head-on, because turning away would be worse. She looked at the photo, let it burn into her, then turned back to the table. Bare eyes didn't go to Joy. They found the camera locked in, direct, unflinching, but she didn't speak. Not yet. Her fingers were still, her posture unchanged, but her breath was the tell. One inhale longer than usual. A slow exhale. Joy leaned back in her chair, but not all the way. Just enough to signal she believed she'd have drawn blood well, she asked. Natalie blinked once, then finally spoke. You've done your research. The voice was quiet, almost too quiet. Joy raised her eyebrows. He's that. Agis. It's not a denial, Natalie said. More. Silence. And then finally, she looked at Joy. I went, she said. I went because at that point, I didn't have the full story. I had rumors, whispers, and I weighed the cost of attending versus not. And yes, I chose to go. Joy didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. The damage, it seemed, had been done. Natalie continued, and I regretted it almost immediately. Not because I got caught, not because the photo surfaced, but because I knew in my gut I had compromised something I believed in for convenience. Sipao Sith looked at the audience, and that's something I have to live with. Joy opened her mouth to speak, but Natalie raised a hand calm. Not aggressive. I'm not finished. Joy closed her lips. I've been praised for speaking up, Natalie said, and criticized for not speaking up sooner. I've been applauded for activism and accused of selective outrage. But I'll say this. She turned to the camera again. There is no perfect activist, no flawless advocate, only people trying, stumbling, adjusting, shifting, and trying again. The moment we demand perfection before action, we lose the very thing we claim to fight for. Growth. The words hung heavy. No music, no reaction, just breath and silence. Then Natalie added, softer now but sharper than anything else she'd said that day. And while we're talking about context, Joy, do you want to talk about your interview from 2004, when you defended another man whose name we've all now scrubbed from our memory? Joy's smile froze. Natalie didn't smile back. I found the clip, she said. You called him misunderstood, said he came from a different generation. That's still out there. Internet doesn't forget, remember? Joy shifted. Not much, but enough. Would you like to explain that? No response. Just that rhythmic tap once, then again dot. Natalie leaned back. Or, she said quietly, should we both admit that we've made compromises and start talking like people instead of symbols? The audience erupted. Not loud, not chaotic, just applause that began in the front row and moved backward like a tight hesitant. Then full. Natalie sat still, but her eyes didn't waver. And in that moment, it became clear she hadn't been cornered. She had been waiting, and now it was her move. Natalie let the applause fade on its own. She didn't wave it down, didn't smile or lean into the approval. She just waited. Waited until the last clap dissolved into silence, until all that was left was the low hum of the lights and the weight of the moment, pressing against the studio walls. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, not weaker softer, like someone who had set down a sword and picked up a scalpel. I've made mistakes, she said. Some of them small, some of them public, and some of them I won't even realize until years from now, when someone else shows me what I didn't see. She paused, let the words breathe. But if we create a world where a mistake defines the whole of a person, then what we're really doing is making sure no one ever tries to do better. Joy shifted in her seat again, not visibly threatened, this time visibly uncomfortable. Her hand moved slightly toward her coffee mug, then stopped. The steam had already gone cold. Natalie turned back to the audience, but her words weren't meant only for them. We're all imperfect. We all carry blind spots. We all have moments where fear speaks louder than values. But I'll tell you what scares me more than being wrong. What terrifies me is a world where we pretend being right all the time is a prerequisite for being heard. The audience was silent again, not from confusion, not from detachment. It was the silence of listening, of processing, of being, of leaning in. Natalie's eyes found the camera. I was wrong when I thought staying quiet would keep me safe. I was wrong to believe that silence could be neutral. Ites, not. Ites, not. Silence is an answer, even when we don't say the words ourselves. Joy opened her mouth, but Natalie didn't look at her. She kept speaking. And you know who benefits from that kind of silence? Say, ask it. The systems, the people empowered, the ones who know that as long as we're busy judging each other's flaws, we'll never look up long enough to see who's really holding the strings. Then she paused not. 4. Effect! Just long enough to reach into the inside pocket of her blazer. She pulled out a small audio recorder, held it gently. Her thumb hovered over the play button. I wasn't planning to use this, she said, But since we're discussing context and memory and what the internet forgets, I think this belongs in the conversation. Joy's eyes narrowed, not fear. Calculation, her mouth stayed shut. Natalie pressed play. At first, just static, a shuffle. Then a voice, clear, familiar. Joy Behar from an interview, not recent, but unmistakably her. Look, the recorded Joy was saying, we've all known people who push boundaries. Is inappropriate? Sure, but dangerous. Come on, that's a stretch. You can't cancel every guy who flirts too long at a party. There, it was. Unmistakable. Archived. Unearthed. The recording stopped. Natalie said nothing. Joy stared at the table, and the silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy with judgment. It was something else. Recognition. The first tear didn't come from the host table. It came from a woman in the second row. Quiet, controlled, a blink that failed, then another. And then she reached for a tissue as if she hadn't realized until that moment how much she needed it. Someone whispered, audible despite their best effort. She's right. Natalie finally looked at Joy again. The problem, she said, is not that people make mistakes. It's that we've created a system where only some people are allowed to outgrow them. Joy looked back at her, face neutral, hand still. And you think that system favors me? Say, ask it. The voice was calm but tight, like someone trying to hold a cracked vase together by hand. Natalie nodded once. I think it's easier to forgive someone who looks like you, who talks like you, who sits in this chair every day and decides who gets grace and who gets grilled. Joy didn't answer. I think people deserve a path to redemption, Natalie continued. But that path has to be open to everyone, not just the people we're comfortable with. There was no applause now, no sound effects, just tension giving way to truth. Joy finally spoke. That's a convenient way to make me the villain. Natalie didn't flinch. No, she said. You're not the villain. You're the mirror. She let that land quiet, sharp. And sometimes when the mirror reflects something we don't like, we break it instead of asking why it's hard to look. Then, as if nothing more needed to be said, Natalie leaned back, folded her hands, and waited. Joy sat still, breathing through her nose, jaw tight. The camera didn't cut away. The producers didn't step in. Something was happening here that didn't need interruption. It needed witness, one by one. The audience leaned in again, and somewhere beyond the glass, the world kept turning. But inside that studio, something had shifted. For the first time all morning, it wasn't about who was winning. It was about who had the courage to tell the truth, and who had the grace to hear it. Joy sat still for a moment too long. That silence, the kind that once gave her power now, felt like dead air. The audience wasn't clapping. They weren't laughing. They were just waiting. And waiting, on live television, was dangerous. She straightened her back, cleared her throat, and spoke. Her words were sharper than they needed to be. You know what bothers me, Natalie, she said. It's not the mistakes. We've all made them. It's the arrogance of thinking your voice is above reproach, of acting like dissent is bravery when it's really just disloyalty, dressed up in poetry. Natalie blinked slowly. Dissent is disloyalty, Joy continued. It is when you criticize your country from a place of privilege, she went on. From a red carpet, from behind a microphone you didn't earn in a voting booth or on a battlefield. The audience stirred. Some leaned forward. Some leaned back. The tension shifted, but it didn't leave. Joy pressed further. You talk about justice, but you only show up when the cameras are on. You pick the causes that make you look good to your crowd. But when it's hard, when it's your country on the line, you choose silence. Or worse, judgment. A man in the back row shook his head. Someone in the front folded their arms. I love this country, Natalie said. Joy laughed once. Dry. Could have fooled me. I love it enough, Natalie continued, to believe it can be better. To believe that criticizing its failures is a form of loyalty, not betrayal. That's convenient, Joy snapped. No, Natalie said calmly. It's necessary. The lights above them shifted ever so slightly warmer, redder. Whether from intention or malfunction, no one knew. But the air felt hotter now, the walls closer. Natalie leaned forward. I've spoken out against policies, against violence, against hypocrisy, knowing people like you would twist that into treason. But let me ask you something, Joy. What's more patriotic? Waving a flag, no matter what it's covering, or asking what it's hiding. The audience reacted not loud, not uniform. Some applause, some murmurs, a rustle of coats as someone stood to leave. Joy's smile cracked at the edges. That's a nice soundbite, she said. It's a question, Natalie replied. One you haven't answered. Joy's mouth opened, but another voice came first. Joy, Whoopi said, her voice low but firm. Don't do this. Surprised, Joy looked at her. You know what she's implying? Whoopi asked. I know what she's saying, Joy answered. And maybe it's something we need to hear, Whoopi added. For the first time that morning, Joy didn't have the room. Natalie turned slightly in her chair, facing the audience now. Her words slowed, intimate. Patriotism isn't about silence. It's about accountability. Love without accountability isn't love. It's possession. A woman in the third row stood and left. A man across the aisle applauded once, then stopped when no one followed. Chaos didn't break out, not yet, but it rippled like a fault line deciding whether to quake. If a country can't survive criticism from its own people, Natalie continued, maybe it's not strength we're defending. Maybe it's fragility. Joy looked away, then back, jaw tightening. You think you're brave? Say Haskit. Say you sit there and design a clothes with a publicist backstage, and you think you're the voice of the oppressed. No, Natalie said. I think I'm someone who listened when they spoke. Se paused. And I think the real danger is people with platforms pretending their comfort is courage. A low murmur rolled through the audience. A woman near the exit hesitated, then slowly returned to her seat. Whoopi looked down at her notes, then folded them closed. We need to take a break, she said quietly. But no one moved. Not yet. Joy folded her arms. I fought for this country in my own way. Natalie nodded once. Then you know that fighting for something means being willing to face its flaws. More silence. The cameras kept rolling. The lights glowed warmer, tighter, as if the walls themselves were inching closer. The air trembled with a storm of patriotism, identity, and truth. Natalie's voice cut through it all, sharp and unyielding. Loving your country doesn't mean protecting its image. It means protecting its people. The line didn't just land. It detonated. For the first time, Joy looked uncertain. And for the first time, Natalie looked unshakable. Joy's voice sliced through the charged silence like a stone through glass. That's enough. I'm done with this performance. She didn't raise her tone, but there was raw fire behind her restraint. She reached for her earpiece, adjusted it without breaking eye contact with Natalie, then flicked a glance toward the stage crew. Can we get security to escort Miss Portman out, please? The words fell like lead. Gasps rippled through the audience. A woman in the front row rose, outraged, then slowly sank back into her seat, stunned. Whoopi's eyes widened, but she stayed silent. Natalie didn't flinch. She didn't rise. She stayed seated, her movements deliberate, reaching into her bag beneath the table. When her hands emerged, they held a small photo, matte, slightly bent at the corners. She stood, and in that heartbeat, the world paused. The lights dimmed, the murmurs stilled. Even Joy's composure faltered. Natalie held the photo up. The image was simple. A girl, maybe 10 years old, wide-eyed. Dust smeared across her cheeks. Her hands were raised not in defense, but in curiosity tearing at something beyond the frame. Something we would never see. The room inhaled. Natalie's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that cut through the tension like a blade. "If justice makes you uncomfortable," she said, holding the photo steady, "then maybe the problem isn't the truth. Maybe the problem is that your power is finally being questioned." The silence was no longer passive. It vibrated through the studio, thunderous, alive. Joy opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The camera zoomed in slowly. First on Natalie, then the photograph, then Joy's face tight. Unreadable, the armor of someone realizing the script had slipped from her control. Natalie turned to the audience, still holding the photo. "This is who I speak for," she said softly. "Not your ratings. Not your fear." She placed the photo gently on the table and looked at Joy one last time. "You asked why I came here," she said. "I came because silence is easy, and I'm done choosing easy." Two security guards approached, unsure, hesitant, waiting for a cue that never came. Natalie walked past them slow, composed. Her heels clicked against the studio floor like a metronome, marking the end of something no one had seen coming. A few, in the audience, began to clap, tentative at first, then firmer, then fractured again. Some stood, some remained seated, some too stunned to react. The cameras lingered on the photo of the little girl, the dust, the silenced before, panning back to Joy. She hadn't moved. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Behind her, the music rose, soft and low, the kind usually signaling a commercial break, but now it felt like a requiem. Across the country, viewers wouldn't remember the applause. They wouldn't remember the argument. They would remember Natalie's words. "If justice makes you uncomfortable, maybe the problem isn't the truth. Maybe it's your power finally being questioned." The line echoed, over and over, long after the broadcast ended, long after the headlines spun and clips were dissected. That moment stayed not the walkout, not the takedown, but the silence, the truth it left behind, and the courage to speak it.